Shalom, Israel. This is Bishop Nathaniel. I want you to know that you can view all our Sabbath classes live on IUIC TV. That's right, I said on IUIC TV. Download the app today. Shalom.
Hey, Shalom, Israel. Most High in Christ bless. I'm Captain Shemaiah, and welcome to another episode of 15 Minutes with the Captain. So I'm going to try to pack this in within 15 minutes. So what's the topic of today's class, today's lesson? It's charity, okay? Today's lesson is on charity. Okay, let's open up with 1 Corinthians chapter 13. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and begin at verse 1.
1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 1.
Come on.
Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass, or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy, and understand all mysteries, and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains, and have not charity, I am nothing.
So Paul is making a clear distinction about how important charity is to have. He says, though I have these various gifts, these various talents, being able to speak in various tongues, if I don't have charity, I am nothing. And that's all of us. We should all have that mindset. Go ahead.
And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing.
So now, I want everyone to pay attention to what was just read. Read verse 3 again.
And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor.
So now, isn't what today's definition of charity is giving all of your stuff to the poor? But Paul says, even though I do that and I don't have charity, showing what? There's a clear distinction between the two. Oftentimes when you look up the definition on charity, it'll talk about giving to the poor and those in need. That's a portion. That's a portion of it. So today we're going to touch on the other sides of that, right? Keep reading.
And though I give my body to be burned and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing.
Come on.
Charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself.
So now I want you all to pay attention to the things or the characteristics or the way Paul categorizes different spirits that are within charity. He tells you that charity suffereth long, endures long. Charity is kind. Charity envieth not. Okay, keep reading.
Charity vaunteth not itself.
So charity doesn't lift itself up or puff itself up. Go ahead.
Is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked.
So it says charity doesn't seek her own, meaning self-willed. Charity is not easily provoked, right? Go ahead.
Thinketh no evil.
And charity thinketh no evil. This is all very important. Now, I'm making those highlights because it'll all come back around shortly, right? Go ahead.
Rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth. Beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Charity never faileth, but whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away.
So our own knowledge would vanish away. So we wanted to get through all of that, right? Let's go to Matthew 22, verse 36. Matthew chapter 22, verse 36, because Paul did an excellent job in explaining charity, right?
Matthew chapter 22, verse 36.
Yes, read that.
Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself.
So the second is just as important as the first. And they're both, according to the scriptures, of course, but one is your love towards the Lord, and the other is the love towards your neighbor. Keep reading.
On these two commandments hang all the law and the
It
prophets.
says, on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. I got to stress that because Paul went in depth about charity. And he clearly said that without charity, we're nothing. So where is that in what we just read? Go to Luke chapter 10, verse 27. Luke chapter 10 and verse 27.
Luke chapter 10, verse 27.
Come on.
And he answering said, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself.
And here he has it again. And thy neighbor as thyself. We just read that in Matthew chapter 22. But keep reading.
And he said unto him, Thou hast answered right. This do, and thou shalt live. But he, willing to justify himself, said unto Jesus, And who is my neighbor?
Wait a minute. This part wasn't in Matthew chapter 22. So now what's said is, okay, I hear all of that. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and soul. I heard that. And then the second is like unto the first, love your neighbor as yourself. And willing to justify himself, he then says, who's my neighbor? Okay, all right. So what we see is a problem in Israel. A problem in Israel, okay? So let's go a little further. Let's go to Acts chapter 4. Acts chapter 4. Why is charity so hard to be understood? And why did Paul have to expound on it so much? We just got a glimpse in Luke chapter 10. Acts 4 and verse 32.
Acts chapter 4, verse 32.
Come on.
And the multitude of them that believed were of one heart and of one soul. Neither said any of them that aught of the things which he possessed was his own.
Right. So here's what they knew. The things that they possessed was not their own, meaning the things in excess. Okay. It's not, well, even what you have right now. Okay. Because at some point you're going to have someone stay with you possibly. Okay. We're going to approach the evil time. Right. So it's important for us to know what charity is. You're going to approach the evil time. Your house may be a place of refuge. Okay. Like when Peter came. Okay, they were all in the sister's house. She had that place of refuge, or what they call today a safe house. We have to understand charity, okay, because that time is approaching. We're gathering together, O nation not desired, but we're going to have to keep this in mind. The things that we have is not for ourselves, okay? It's not for ourselves. Your home may be that place of refuge for those that are fleeing from various cities, because we know that evil time is coming according to the word of God, okay? So always keep that in mind. It's not yours, okay? But this verse right here is talking about what they had in excess. Go ahead.
But they had all things common.
But they had all things common. Jump down to verse 34.
Verse 34.
Come on.
Neither was there any among them that lacked. For as many as were possessors of lands or houses sold them, and brought the prices of the things that were sold, and laid them down at the apostles' feet.
Go ahead.
And distribution was made unto every man according as he had need. And Joseph,
and jump down to verse 37.
Verse 37, having land, sold it, and brought the money, and laid it at the apostles' feet.
So we see what the great mission is. Those who had excess, those who had extras, what did they do? They sold them and they brought the money and placed it at the apostles' feet. Let's go to the next chapter over. Verse 1.
Acts chapter 5 and verse 1.
Come on.
But a certain man named Ananias, with Sapphira, his wife, sold a possession and kept back part of the price. His wife also being privy to it, and brought a certain part and laid it at the apostles' feet. But Peter said, Ananias, why hath Satan filled thine heart to lie to the Holy Ghost and to keep back part of the price of the land?
So jump to verse 5 now.
Verse 5. And Ananias, hearing these words, fell down and gave up the ghost. And great fear came on all them that heard these things.
So I want you to see this. Because remember, it's one continuous letter. So in chapter 4, towards the end, the general concern, the general thought, they all agreed one together. listen, we have to help brothers and sisters out. So being that we have excess, let's sell it, give it to the apostles, let them make distribution, right? Now, a little time has lapsed, and now Ananias and his wife Sapphira, whichever one, they decided, though everyone is in the same spirit, we're going to be contrary to that spirit by having Satan fill us to go against the building process of the apostles, the prophets, and all those before them. So jump to what verse did you just read?
Verse 5, sir.
Jump to verse 7.
Verse 7. And it was about the space of 3 hours after, when his wife, not knowing what was done, came in.
So she didn't know her husband dropped dead. Most High put him to death, right? Go ahead.
And Peter answered unto her, Tell me, whether ye sold the land for so much? And she said, Yea, for so much. Then Peter said unto her, How is it that ye have agreed together to tempt the Spirit of the Lord? Behold, the feet of them which have buried thy husband are at thy door, and shall carry thee out. Then fell she down straightway at his feet, and yielded up the ghost.
And gave up the ghost. She was put to death as well. Go ahead.
And the young men came in and found her dead, and carrying her forth, buried her by her husband.
So now let's go to 1 John chapter 3. So we want to show you the severity in what we're reading about charity. Paul says, without charity, I am nothing. And it's clear. He said, though I bestow my goods to the poor, I'm nothing without charity. Because you can be doing something to be seen of men. Remember, charity vaunteth not itself. Charity thinketh no evil. Basically, charity does not want it to be done because of the eyes of men. That's not what charity is about, right? So read that. 1 John chapter 3, verse 17.
1 John chapter 3, verse 17. But whoso hath this world's good, and seeth his brother have need, and shutteth up his bowels of compassion from him, how dwelleth the love of God in him?
That's a question. How is it that you have excess? How is it in this nation you have abundance, and you see your brother in need, but you shut up your bowels? Meaning you don't even attempt to provide anything. Don't attempt to provide any relief. Don't attempt to be helpful. Read it one more time. I like the way that sounds.
But whoso hath this world's good, and seeth his brother have need, and shutteth up his bowels of compassion from him, how dwelleth the love of God in him?
So that's the question. How in the world can the love of God dwell in you when you don't have simple compassion? That's very, very simple. That's nothing difficult, right? James 2 and 8. James chapter 2 and verse 8.
James chapter 2 and verse 8.
Come on.
If ye fulfill the royal law according to the scripture, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Ye do well.
Wait a minute. We read this earlier in both Matthew chapter 22. We read it also in Luke chapter 10, that this is one of the 2 greatest commandments. But here is calling it the royal law. The royal law that must be fulfilled. This is why Paul made a clear distinction that he's nothing without charity. So now, let's go to the royal law. Leviticus 19. It's going to say the same thing, but I want to go there. Leviticus 19:17. I think we got like 4 minutes. I've been keeping time, y'all. I'm trying to do better with the 15 minutes now. You know, a Jew be trying. Leviticus 19 and verse 17.
Leviticus chapter 19, verse 17. Thou shalt not hate thy brother in thine heart.
Come on.
Thou shalt in any wise rebuke thy neighbor, and not suffer sin upon him.
Because the objective is you don't want your neighbor, your brother, to fall in sin. Go ahead.
Thou shalt not avenge, nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people.
So now, why is it the royal law? Because it goes in depth about loving your neighbor as yourself. Loving your neighbor as yourself means you won't hate your brother, means you won't suffer sin upon your brother, You won't bear a grudge against your brother. You won't avenge your brother. This is a royal law for a royal people. You got to think about that. We're royalty walking the earth today as servants. But God says the royal law for the royal people is what we're reading right here. So read verse 18 again.
Thou shalt not avenge, nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord.
So it's going to show you loving your neighbor as yourself comes with various subtitles or subcategories. And we just went through them, right? So real quick, let's go to Exodus chapter 20 now. We're almost done. Exodus, the 20th chapter. Because what we read in Matthew chapter 22, the two great commandments, Luke chapter 10, the two great commandments is love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and soul. And the second is like unto it, love thy neighbor as thyself. And we've been reading that over and over and over again. We read it in James as well. Now, just for time's sake, the first four commandments is you loving God with all your heart and soul. Okay, thou shalt make no graven thou shalt make no graven images to bow down to. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt make no graven images to bow down to. Taking the Lord's name in vain, and the Sabbath day. The first four are loving the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, right? And all the other commandments pertaining to the Lord fall under that. But now, let's start at verse 12 real quick.
Exodus chapter 20, verse 12. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee.
So who does this pertain to? It pertains to loving your neighbor as yourself. Go ahead.
Thou shalt not kill.
Who is it referring to? Because just like look in all our neighborhoods, who are we killing? Brothers and sisters that look just like us. So that falls under loving your neighbor as yourself. You love your neighbor so much, or you have so much charity, you would never hurt your brother or sister. Go ahead.
Thou shalt not commit adultery.
Who do you commit adultery with? Love your neighbor as yourself. That is the ultimate charity. Go ahead.
Thou shalt not steal.
Who are you going to steal from? Your neighbor. Your neighbor. So this is how we fulfill the royal law. And as Paul went into eloquently and in more detail, that's what charity is. But keep reading.
Thou shalt not bear false witness.
Against who?
Against thy neighbor.
Against who?
Against thy neighbor.
Hold on a second. So not bearing false witness against your neighbor is loving your neighbor as yourself. You're fulfilling the second greatest commandment. And Paul went in detail about that great commandment. Go ahead.
Thou shalt not covet.
Covet what?
Thy neighbor's house.
Here it is again. There it is about the neighbor. Okay? These commandments are dealing with loving your neighbor as yourself. Go ahead.
Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Nor his manservant, nor his maidservant,
come on,
nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's.
No, anything that is thy neighbor's. So, let's go back now to 1 Corinthians chapter 13.
1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 1.
And start at verse 4 for time's sake.
Verse 4. Charity suffereth long.
With who? Who should you have that level of patience with? Your neighbor. Go ahead.
And is kind.
Kind to who? Your neighbor. Go ahead.
Charity envieth not.
Who are you? Who are you going to envy? Your neighbor. Come on.
Charity vaunteth not itself.
Who does it vaunt itself or become prideful to? Your neighbor. That's the spirit of emulation that Paul goes into as well, trying to outdo each other so that you vaunt yourself over your brother. Go ahead.
Is not puffed up.
Is not puffed up, prideful. Go ahead.
Does not behave itself unseemly.
To who? Go ahead.
Seeketh not her own.
Unseemly means disgraceful, but go ahead.
seeketh not her own.
Seeketh not her own way or her own will, because your mindset is, I'm not going to do something that's going to jeopardize my neighbor, jeopardize my neighbors, or shame the ministry. Because those are filled with, the ministry is filled with your neighbors. Go ahead.
Is not easily provoked.
Provoked by who? Provoked by your neighbor. Go ahead.
Thinketh no evil.
Think evil of who? Thy neighbor. Go ahead.
Rejoiceth not in iniquity.
Whose iniquity? Because Leviticus chapter 19 says you're supposed to tell your brother their sins. Tell your brother, I'm going to jack it up. Go back to Leviticus 19 real quick. I'm sorry. I done jacked it up. Bear with me.
Leviticus chapter 19, verse 17.
Verse 17, right.
Thou shalt not hate thy brother in thine heart.
Go ahead.
Thou shalt in any wise rebuke thy neighbor.
Go ahead.
And not suffer sin upon him.
So now go back. 1 Corinthians 13.
1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 6.
Come on.
Rejoiceth not in iniquity.
Why doesn't charity rejoice in iniquity? Why? Because you're fulfilling the royal law by loving your neighbor as yourself. Go ahead.
But rejoiceth in the truth.
But rejoice in what?
In the truth.
And we too rejoice in the truth. All praises to the Most High. I pray that brothers and sisters got some understanding today. I pray it was edifying. And Lord's will, we'll see you on the next episode of 15 Minutes with the Captains. Shalom.
Nation is men leading by example.